For those of you who have been watching our work for a while, you will have already heard me say multiple times how the Cold War was not just about a military or ideological standoff, but was a pervasive undercurrent in the fabric of life. And often, there was a push-pull experience. Something in the cultural sphere would happen and push something economically or politically, or vice versa, where politics would pull culture. But sometimes there was a deliberate intersection, where politics would intentionally push something in the cultural sphere. Soviet art is a very clear, obvious, and well-known example of this, but less well-known were American efforts to guide the artistic community in the West. I'm your host David, and today we are going to look at the CIA's work that created the Abstract Expressionism movement in the West. This is the Cold War. The Cold War was unlike any conflict the world had seen before. It wasn't fought with traditional weapons or in clearly defined theaters of war. Instead, it was waged in the hearts and minds of people across the globe. Two superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union, vied for ideological dominance in every sphere imaginable: economics, technology, education, and even culture. Amid this ideological battleground, art emerged as an unlikely weapon. The US, eager to prove its cultural and intellectual superiority, seized on abstract expressionism as a symbol of freedom and creativity. Through covert funding and strategic exhibitions, the CIA positioned this avant-garde movement as a direct counterpoint to Soviet Socialist Realism. This is the story of how paint splatters and color fields became tools of diplomacy, how artists unknowingly served as ambassadors of American ideals, and how art was weaponized in the battle for global influence. It's a story of creativity, manipulation, and the blurred lines between cultural expression and political propaganda. So why art? In the Soviet Union, art served as a tool of the state. Socialist Realism, the official art style of the USSR, depicted heroic workers, soldiers, and farmers in idealized settings. These works celebrated the virtues of communism and reinforced the state's propaganda narratives. By contrast, American art was often chaotic, experimental, and deeply individualistic. Abstract Expressionism in particular embodied the spirit of freedom and innovation. Its leading figures, Jackson Pollock, Willem de Kooning, and Mark Rothko, rejected traditional forms and embraced abstract, emotionally charged techniques. This stark contrast made art an ideal battlefield for ideological warfare. The US could position itself as a beacon of creativity and intellectual freedom by promoting abstract expressionism. Art became a metaphor for democracy, unpredictable, open to interpretation, and endlessly innovative. But there was a problem. Modern art was not universally beloved in America. Many Americans, including politicians and critics, dismissed it as elitist or even subversive. President Truman famously derided modern art, declaring after a viewing of Yasuo Kuniyoshi's Circus Girl Resting, "If that's art, then I'm a Hottentot." In the conservative climate of post-war America, abstract expressionism was clearly a hard sell. Despite this, the CIA saw potential in the movement. Recognizing the need to counter Soviet propaganda on a global stage, the agency identified art as a powerful tool for shaping perceptions. Abstract expressionism's rejection of tradition and embrace of freedom made it the perfect cultural weapon. The CIA's foray into the cultural sphere began not with art, but with an awareness of how powerful cultural products could be in shaping global perceptions. Early successes during the Second World War, like the US Office of War Information's use of film and literature, had already demonstrated the effectiveness of cultural propaganda. As the Cold War escalated, cultural diplomacy became an essential front in the ideological battle between the United States and the Soviet Union. The 1948 establishment of the OPC, the Office of Political Coordination, marked the formal beginning of a cultural counteroffensive. The OPC, whose creation had been spearheaded by George Kennan, operated independently after its creation until it was brought under the direct control of the CIA in 1950. Frank Wisner, who headed the OPC, was a staunch believer in the power of culture to win hearts and minds. Wisner's team launched initiatives across Europe and Asia, targeting intellectuals, artists, and academics as key influencers in the battle against communism. One of the OPC's most significant initiatives was founding the Congress for Cultural Freedom, the CCF, in 1950. This CCF should of course not be confused with Canada's CCF, the party that first introduced single-payer healthcare in Saskatchewan. Based in Paris, the Congress for Cultural Freedom operated as an ostensibly independent organization dedicated to promoting freedom of expression and countering Soviet influence in cultural circles. With funding and guidance from the CIA, the CCF became a major player in global cultural scene. It organized exhibitions, concerts, and conferences, funded literary and cultural journals, and supported artists and writers who aligned with its mission. The CIA's long leash strategy ensured that its involvement remained hidden. This strategy relied on intermediaries like the Fairfield Foundation and the Ford Foundation to channel funds to cultural projects without revealing their true source. Through these intermediaries, the CIA supported abstract expressionist artists and critics, subsidized exhibitions, and even influenced the art market to promote the movement internationally. One of the most famous examples of this covert funding was MoMA, the Museum of Modern Art's international exhibitions. MoMA, under the leadership of Nelson Rockefeller, played a crucial role in promoting abstract expressionism. Rockefeller, a passionate advocate for modern art and a staunch anti-communist, viewed the movement as a powerful symbol of American innovation and freedom. Through exhibitions like The New American Painting, MoMA introduced abstract expressionism to audiences across Europe and Asia, positioning it as the pinnacle of cultural achievement in the free world. To truly understand abstract expressionism's role in the Cold War, we need to delve into the lives and works of the artists who became its unwitting ambassadors. Jackson Pollock, often considered the face of abstract expressionism, exemplified the movement's chaotic brilliance. His drip paintings, such as Autumn Rhythm and No. 5, 1948, rejected traditional forms and narratives, inviting viewers into a visceral, emotional experience. Critics hailed Pollock as a revolutionary, while skeptics dismissed his work as incomprehensible. Pollock's rise to fame was partly fueled by the support of influential critics like Clement Greenberg, who championed abstract expressionism as a uniquely American movement. Greenberg argued that the movement broke from European traditions, emphasizing individuality and freedom, values aligned closely with the CIA's Cold War agenda. Mark Rothko, another leading figure in the movement, took a different approach. His color-field paintings, characterized by large, luminous rectangles of color, conveyed a sense of meditative depth and spirituality. Rothko's work, like Pollock's, was open to interpretation, reflecting the democratic ideal of freedom of thought. However, Rothko himself was deeply ambivalent about his role in the art world and distrusted the commercialization of his work. The CIA's greatest asset was abstract expressionism's abstract and ambiguous nature. Unlike Soviet Socialist Realism, which dictated a clear narrative, abstract expressionism invited multiple interpretations. It was a visual representation of democracy, open, diverse, and innovative. By showcasing this art on the global stage, the CIA sought to contrast the freedom of American culture with the rigidity of Soviet totalitarianism. One of the most significant milestones in this campaign was the New American Painting Tour, which traveled to major European cities between 1958 and 1959. Organized by MoMA with covert support from the CIA, the exhibition featured works by Pollock, Rothko, de Kooning, and other leading abstract expressionists. The tour was a resounding success, earning widespread acclaim and helping to solidify New York as the new center of the art world. MoMA's role in promoting abstract expressionism cannot be overstated. Founded in 1929 by Abby Aldrich Rockefeller, the museum was an early advocate for modern art in America. Under the leadership of her son, Nelson Rockefeller, MoMA became a powerhouse in the global art world, using its influence to promote American art as a symbol of progress and innovation. Nelson Rockefeller's commitment to modern art was both personal and political. As a prominent businessman and politician, Rockefeller understood the power of cultural diplomacy. His tenure as MoMA's president coincided with the early years of the Cold War, and he worked closely with the CIA to align the museum's activities with America's strategic goals. Rockefeller's connections to the art world and his passion for abstract expressionism made him an ideal partner for the CIA's cultural initiatives. One of Rockefeller's key contributions was his support for international exhibitions. Through MoMA, he helped organize shows like 12 Modern American Painters and Sculptors and the New American Painting, which introduced abstract expressionism to audiences in Europe and beyond. These exhibitions were carefully curated to showcase the diversity and dynamism of American art, reinforcing the narrative of cultural superiority. Rockefeller's influence extended beyond MoMA. As a member of the U.S. State Department's Advisory Committee on Cultural Diplomacy, he was pivotal in shaping America's cultural policy during the Cold War. His efforts helped secure funding for cultural initiatives and ensured modern art remained at the forefront of America's global image. Now, while Nelson Rockefeller's leadership at MoMA established the institution as a hub for cultural diplomacy, the CIA's partnership with MoMA was strengthened by individuals who understood both the power of art and the mechanics of covert operations. Chief among them was Thomas W. Braden, whose dual roles at MoMA and the CIA exemplified the seamless interplay between cultural and political strategy during the Cold War. Before joining the CIA in 1950, Braden served as the executive secretary of MoMA from April 1948 to November 1949. This experience exposed him to the art world and its potential for shaping public opinion. During this time at MoMA, Braden likely developed the aesthetic and strategic perspective that would guide his later work at the CIA, particularly in promoting abstract expressionism as a tool of ideological warfare. After transitioning to the CIA, Braden became head of the IOD, the International Organizations Division, from 1951 to 1954. Under his leadership, the IOD orchestrated a wide array of cultural initiatives designed to counter Soviet influence. These included creating front organizations to fund cultural programs, sponsoring jazz performances and opera tours, and producing an animated adaptation of George Orwell's Animal Farm. Braden's division placed agents in industries like publishing, film, and travel writing, ensuring that American cultural products reached audiences worldwide. Braden's involvement with abstract expressionism was part of a broader effort to demonstrate a free society's intellectual and creative vitality. He understood the ideological stakes of the Cold War and described the conflict as a war fought with ideas instead of bombs. Abstract expressionism, emphasizing individualism, freedom of expression, embodied the ideals that the US sought to project to the world. In Braden's words, the CIA's support of Jackson Pollock's drip paintings and Mark Rothko's color fields was part of the battle for Picasso's mind, a metaphor for winning over the European intelligentsia. However, Braden was keenly aware of the domestic challenges of McCarthyism and widespread anti-communist sentiment in Congress. Officially funding such avant-garde projects would have been politically impossible. As Braden quipped, the idea that Congress would have approved of many of our projects was about as likely as the John Birch Society's approving Medicare. To circumvent these obstacles, the CIA relied on wealthy individuals to establish private foundations that served as fronts for funding cultural initiatives. Braden explained the simplicity of the process. We would go to somebody in New York who was a well-known rich person and say, "We want to set up a foundation." We would tell him what we were trying to do and pledge him to secrecy, and he would say, "Of course I'll do it." These foundations then supported exhibitions, publications, and other cultural programs. In defending the CIA's cultural initiatives, Braden later argued that their purpose was not to use art as propaganda in the crude sense. Rather, the goal was to demonstrate that the extraordinary creativity of abstract expressionism could only emerge in a society free from government control. In this way, the art became the message, embodying the ideals of democracy through its form and method. Reflecting on this mission, Braden remained unapologetic about the CIA's methods, defending them in a 1967 article titled, "I'm Glad the CIA is Immoral." For Braden and his contemporaries, the cultural battlefield was just as critical as the political and military fronts of the Cold War. But what about the creators themselves? What did they think? Well, abstract expressionist artists like Jackson Pollock, Willem de Kooning, and Mark Rothko were largely unaware of the CIA's role in promoting their work. Often depicted as the quintessential American artist, Pollock had ties to leftist movements during the 1930s. His rise to fame coincided with the height of McCarthyism, a time when many artists were scrutinized for their political affiliations. On the other hand, Rothko was deeply skeptical of capitalism and the commodification of art. He famously refused to complete a lucrative commission for the Four Seasons restaurant in New York, not to be confused with Four Seasons Landscaping in Pennsylvania, believing that his work would lose its meaning in such a setting. The irony of his work being used as a tool of Cold War propaganda would not have been lost on him. De Kooning, known for his abstract yet figurative works, also harbored left-leaning sympathies. Like Pollock and Rothko, he created deeply personal art that was resistant to clear interpretation, a far cry from the overt messaging of Soviet Socialist Realism. That this work was co-opted to serve a geopolitical agenda was a betrayal of its original intent. The CIA's strategy of indirect funding allowed the agency to maintain plausible deniability while exerting significant influence over the cultural landscape. This long leash approach ensured that the artist remained unaware of their role in the broader political strategy. The CIA's involvement in promoting abstract expressionism remained a closely guarded secret until the 1970s, when investigative journalists and congressional inquiries began to uncover the extent of its cultural operations. The Church Committee, established in 1975 to investigate abuses by U.S. intelligence agencies, revealed that the CIA had funneled millions of dollars into cultural initiatives, including the promotion of modern art. These revelations sparked widespread outrage. Many artists and intellectuals felt betrayed, believing their work had been co-opted without their knowledge or consent. Critics accused the CIA of undermining the very freedom it claimed to champion by secretly manipulating the cultural sphere. The public response to these revelations was mixed. Some saw the CIA's cultural campaigns as a countermeasure against Soviet propaganda, while others viewed them as a cynical manipulation of art and intellectual freedom. Academic debates over the ethics of these campaigns continue to this day, with some arguing that the ends justified the means, and others condemning the CIA for compromising the autonomy of the arts. We should also consider that the CIA's promotion of abstract expressionism has had profound implications for the art world. By elevating abstract expressionism to the status of a global movement, the CIA inadvertently shaped the trajectory of modern art. The movement's success paved the way for subsequent developments in contemporary art, from pop art to minimalism. However, the revelations about the CIA's role also sparked a backlash amongst artists and critics. Many questioned whether abstract expressionism's prominence resulted from genuine artistic merit or political manipulation. This debate continues to influence discussions about the relationship between art and politics. One thing becomes clear as we reflect on this chapter of the Cold War. Art is never created in a vacuum. It's shaped by the forces of its time, and in turn, it shapes the world around us. In the hands of the CIA, even a drip painting became a weapon of democracy, a reminder of the profound and sometimes paradoxical relationship between culture and power. We hope you found this episode both interesting and useful, and to make sure you don't miss our future work, please make sure you subscribe to our channel and have pressed the bell button, which is currently splashing paint on a canvas, waiting for that sweet, sweet CIA funding to arrive. Please consider supporting us on Patreon at patreon.com/thecoldwar or through YouTube membership. We can be reached via email at thecoldwarchannel@gmail.com. This is the Cold War Channel, and as we think about the Cold War, please remember that history is shades of gray and rarely black and white.